Another day, another Houthi missile fired from Yemen that triggered red alert sirens in Jerusalem. The IDF said the missile was intercepted and no casualties were reported. This as the army offensive in Gaza is intensifying, and the IDF announced that all standing army and infantry brigades have now been deployed to Gaza. The goal, continuing ramping up pressure until Hamas agrees to a ceasefire deal. ILTV's Steve Leibovitz has the latest.
In addition to the entire standing army, a small number of reserves are also now deployed in Gaza. Even before the announcement, the army said that 5 divisions were operating in Gaza with tens of thousands of troops. Officials say that the offensive will continue ramping up as long as Hamas refuses to agree to a hostage for ceasefire deal. The IDF struck over 100 targets in the Gaza Strip over the weekend. The targets included a rocket launcher used to fire earlier at southern Israel. Other targets included terror operatives, buildings used by the terrorists, tunnels, and other infrastructure. The army said that ground forces killed numerous operatives and destroyed booby-trapped buildings, anti-tank launch posts, and tunnel infrastructure. Among those killed by the army were 6 Hamas gunmen who were looting humanitarian aid trucks. The army said Hamas was stealing food meant for children and families suffering from severe hunger. Hamas claimed that the gunmen were guarding aid trucks against looters. The IDF said humanitarian aid is allowed into Gaza, and Israel will make every effort to ensure it does not reach terror groups to aid their war effort. The UN chief said that only a teaspoon of aid was getting into Gaza after Israel's 11-week-long blockade. Israel said 83 more trucks entered Gaza from Kerem Shalom carrying flour, food, drugs, and medical equipment. Israel said a total of 388 trucks entered Gaza since the easing of the blockade. The UN says that 500 trucks are needed daily. Israel is planning a new aid distribution system sponsored by the United States and run by private contractors that will soon begin operations at 4 distribution centers, but the starting date is unclear. The UN says it will not work with the new system, claiming it will leave aid distribution conditional on Israel's political and military goals in Gaza.
And Prime Minister Netanyahu lashed out at criticism of the Gaza war coming from the leaders of France, Canada, and the UK, saying they were on the wrong side of history. Netanyahu also warned against their planned recognition of a Palestinian state. ILTV's Devo Klein has more.
Replying to the joint statement by 3 leading allies describing their, quote, horror at the Israeli escalation of the war in Gaza, Prime Minister Netanyahu did not pull punches. Netanyahu told the leaders of the UK, France, and Canada were emboldening Hamas with their comments.
You won't be surprised to learn that Hamas thanked President Macron and Prime Ministers Steinberg and Carney for demanding that Israel end its war in Gaza immediately. Hamas was right to thank them, because by issuing their demand, replete with a threat of sanctions against Israel, not Hamas, these 3 leaders effectively said they want Hamas to remain in power. They want Israel to stand down and accept that Hamas's army of mass murderers will survive, rebuild, and repeat the October 7th massacre again and again and again, because that's what Hamas has vowed to do. I say to President Macron, Prime Minister Carney, and Prime Minister Steinberg, when mass murderers, rapists, baby killers, and kidnappers thank you, you're on the wrong side of justice. You're on the wrong side of humanity. And you're on the wrong side of history.
A French government spokesman rejected Netanyahu's criticism and also said that the allies would move forward with plans to recognize a Palestinian state next month.
Avance, nous avons été rejoints, comme vous le savez, par un certain nombre d'autres pays, le Canada, le Royaume-Uni et d'autres pays, et ça fait l'objet des travaux pour la réunion qui aura lieu à New York à la fin du mois de juin, sous la présidence de l'Arabie Saoudite et de la France. Donc ça avance. On verra si ça va jusqu'au bout à cette période-là.
Netanyahu said this about the allies' plan.
I could never understand how this simple truth evades the leaders of France, Britain, Canada, and others. They're now proposing to establish a Palestinian state and reward these murderers with the ultimate prize. Well, for 18 years, we had a de facto Palestinian state. It's called Gaza. And what did we get? Peace? No. We got the most savage slaughter of Jews since the Holocaust.
And the United States and the Islamic Republic of Iran are continuing negotiations over Iran's nuclear capabilities. The fifth round of talks has concluded and a sixth round is expected. Limited progress is being made, and Jerusalem is closely monitoring the negotiations, with reports indicating it could strike Iran's nuclear facilities despite the ongoing talks. The details in the following report. American and Iranian negotiators concluded a fifth round of talks over Iran's nuclear capabilities in Rome over the weekend, with limited progress being reported. U.S. Middle East envoy Steve Witkoff and Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi led the talks through Omani mediators. A sixth round of talks is expected, though the date and place have not yet been decided. Following the talks, Iran's foreign minister said the negotiations were complicated and that more discussions were needed.
مذاکرات پیچیده‌تر از اون هست که با 2-3 جلسه بخواد حل و فصل بشه. ما همین که الان در مسیر معقولی قرار داریم، به نظر من یک پیشرفت خودش.
One of the main issues remains Iran's uranium enrichment program. Washington has said that Iran must dismantle all uranium enrichment production, while the Islamic Republic says their uranium enrichment is for peaceful purposes and is non-negotiable. Meanwhile, U.S. President Donald Trump spoke with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu ahead of the nuclear negotiations. According to the White House, the president made it very clear to Netanyahu that he wants to see a deal struck with Iran, though if negotiations fail, a, quote, more severe and negative option remain on the table. Jerusalem has been watching the ongoing talks closely and insists it maintains the right to strike Iran's nuclear facilities to prevent the regime from attaining a nuclear weapon, which presents an existential threat to the state of Israel. For now, the talks are ongoing, with some experts saying Iran is simply stalling for time. The question remains, how much longer will these negotiations be allowed to continue? And will a deal truly prevent Iran from progressing towards nuclear weapons? U.S. President Donald Trump heralded a new era of diplomacy, saying he prefers deal-making to war. As such, diplomatic efforts are now underway to prevent Iran from attaining a nuclear weapon, but we're also seeing unilateral diplomacy at work from countries such as the UK, Canada, and France. But is diplomacy really the right way forward in the Middle East, or are these efforts actually harming the long-term security of the region? Joining us now to discuss is Dr. Gerald Steinberg of NGO Monitor. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
So diplomacy seems to be the name of the game these days. Let's start with a new report that came out just today that the Trump administration has asked Israel to delay the start of the Gaza operation to allow even more time for hostage negotiations, which have been stalled for some time now after Hamas rejected the last American proposal. So maybe you can explain this to us. Why delay yet again? Hamas is clearly taking advantage with each delay. What happened to all hell will break loose?
I don't trust many of these reports because they are usually leaked or provided by people who have an interest. They have skin in the game. They're trying to either prevent military action, in this case, prevent Israel from going further into Gaza and doing more to uproot the Hamas capabilities, the infrastructure, the remaining tunnels, all the missiles and rockets that are still there. They may be trying to avoid an Israeli strike against the Iranian nuclear facilities, or they may be trying to tilt it the other way in other types of leaks and reports. I think we have to be, in this case, and it's hard to do, to be patient and to see how things develop.
So you mentioned the UK, France, and Canadian endeavors. Western allies of Israel who are, morally posturing here when some of them should really be hanging their heads in shame at the history of their own countries and the current state in their own countries. How much of a threat or an impact will their unilateral initiatives have on Israel?
Well, these initiatives, whether it's the demand that Israel stop its military action and help the Palestinians, reinforces this image of Palestinian victimhood. It's a slogan or an image. It's been around since 1948. Palestinians are incapable of helping themselves. They're only victims. There is no terrorism that can be stopped by strong military action. Those are slogans that we hear repeated over and over again. Some of that is posturing, as you said, posturing for domestic political purposes, the large Muslim populations and the fear of terrorism. And some of it is, I think, a very simplistic, okay, I'll drop the academic line, I'll say naive embrace of these kinds of slogans that Palestinians are victims and we have to help the victims. We also hear from them very often this line. I hear it also from a small group of Israelis quite frequently. Israel can always take military action if Hamas takes power again, if there's another threat. That's exactly what they said in 1995 or 1993 during the Oslo framework. Israel will withdraw, and then Israel will be able to move and take military action. Again, in 2005, 10 years later, when Israel unilaterally withdrew from all of Gaza, and again, we heard this phrase, well, if the Hamas takes over, if Gaza becomes a major threat of terrorist action, then Israel can easily crush that with its overwhelming military power. That's all a myth, and it needs to be confronted. I don't think that the heads of government in France and the UK and also in France, the UK, and Canada are paying attention to the reality on the ground. They're repeating the same slogans over and over again. And so I don't think that Israel confronting them will make much of a difference. I think Israel has to decide, the Israeli government, not just the prime minister, but together, and lead the Israeli consensus into taking action that will serve Israeli security. And we'll have to deal with the diplomatic fallout as it happens.
All right, Dr. Gerald Steinberg, thank you so much for your analysis today.
Good, happy to be with you.
And the murder of Israeli Yaron Lishinsky and his girlfriend Sarah Milgram in Washington is now being investigated as a hate crime and act of terror. More on this from ILTV's Mayan Hoffman.
Yaron Lishinsky, the 30-year-old man murdered last week outside an event at the Capital Jewish Museum, was flown to Israel over the weekend. He was buried today in Jerusalem. A Christian, he was laid to rest in Ein Kerem, just up the hill from the birthplace of John the Baptist. His girlfriend, Sarah Milgram, will be buried Tuesday in her hometown of Kansas. Elias Rodriguez, the man accused of opening fire on the couple and a group of others in Washington, was charged in federal court with at least 2 counts of first-degree murder. He was also charged with the murder of foreign officials, causing death with a firearm, and discharging a firearm in a crime of violence. Janine Pirro, U.S. Attorney for the District of Washington, told reporters the case is being investigated as a hate crime and a crime of terrorism, and she warned that further charges may be added. FBI agents were seen at Rodriguez's apartment in Chicago on Thursday, where law enforcement blocked off the street. Police also stepped up security at U.S. embassies and synagogues across the country.
The evil of anti-Semitism must be eradicated from our society. I spoke to the Attorney General this morning. The Department of Justice will be prosecuting the perpetrator responsible for this to the fullest extent of the law. Hatred has no place in the United States of America under President Donald Trump.
U.S. Attorney Pam Bondi said authorities believe the suspect acted alone. Rodriguez was previously affiliated with the Party for Socialism and Liberation, a far-left group in Chicago. According to a post on X, he was briefly involved with the group in 2017, but had no known contact with them for over 7 years. Rodriguez was also named in a 2018 news report as a member of the Chicago branch of Answer, Act Now to Stop War and End Racism, which has organized pro-Palestinian demonstrations. After being detained by event security, Rodriguez chanted, "Free Palestine, free Palestine." Several pro-Palestinian activists have expressed support for Rodriguez, including TikTok influencer Guy Christensen, who has over 3.4 million followers. He posted, "I want to urge you first to support Elias's actions." He also added, "He's a resistance fighter. The fight against Israel's war machine includes their foreign diplomats in this country." Christensen is among a controversial but growing number of voices openly supporting the attack, but he is likely the one with the largest audience.
And in other news, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has appointed Major General David Zini as the new head of the domestic intelligence service, the Shin Bet. Zini has served for over 3 decades in the IDF in many operational and command positions and is currently the head of the IDF Training Command and General Staff Corps. His appointment has caused major controversy as the Shin Bet has been at the forefront of a growing political and legal battle between Netanyahu's coalition and his opposition. The Attorney General has also announced her opposition to the decision. The appointment comes after Ronen Bar, the outgoing head of the Shin Bet, announced his resignation in April, saying he would step down on June 15th. The Prime Minister had previously sought to fire him, citing a lack of trust. The Shin Bet handles counterterrorism and intelligence operations, and Undermining was responsible for the massive intelligence failure that led to the October 7th massacre. And over the weekend, the IDF launched a wave of airstrikes hitting Hezbollah targets across Lebanon. In the southern village of Tul, the IDF issued an evacuation warning identifying a Hezbollah-linked building that stored munitions and launchers. After the site was hit, there were multiple strikes across the country. The army said it targeted Hezbollah military infrastructure, including rocket launchers and weapons depots. The attacks were reported west of Baalbek and the southern city of Tir. Lebanese sources say a Hezbollah operative was killed in a drone strike. The army said the presence of weapons and Hezbollah operatives in the areas hit were in blatant violation of the understandings between Israel and Lebanon. And now, Canadian-Israeli philanthropist Silvin was named to Time magazine's first ever Time 100 philanthropy list. Adams joins a powerhouse group of global changemakers, including Oprah Winfrey, Michael Bloomberg, Melinda French Gates, and David Beckham. Time recognized Adams for his historic $100 million gift to Ben-Gurion University and his deep commitment to Israel's future through health, education, and humanitarian projects. He says his mission is to build bridges and share Israel's story with the world. Congratulations, Mr. Adams. And moving on, after the release of American-Israeli Idan Alexander, officials believed the momentum could swing into yet another hostage release. But instead, Israel brought home their negotiating team in Doha. ILTV's Shosh Bedrosian reports on the deadlock in conversations that continues to keep 58 hostages locked away in Gaza, as Hamas also allows their own people to continue suffering.
Hundreds of people came together in Tel Aviv after Shabbat to protest for the release of the hostages still in Gaza. As war rages inside of Gaza with a growing ground offensive, Hamas continues to allow their own people to suffer by not cutting a deal with Israel, who is demanding for them to demilitarize and release all hostages. On Thursday, Prime Minister Netanyahu called back the high-ranking members of the negotiating team in Doha back to Israel for consultations after a week of, quote, intense negotiations. The week of conversations following Idan Alexander's release, which officials believed would bring momentum, continued to stall with no progress made, according to officials. Meanwhile, on Friday and Saturday in Israel, Israelis reported receiving disturbing phone calls and voice messages of hostages pleading to be released and sounds of explosions in the background. The calls used recordings from a propaganda video of hostages Yosef Chaim Ochana and Elkana Bochbot and came from unidentifiable numbers. The National Cyber Directorate said the messages were an attempt to create panic in the public. As the ground offensive carries on and Israel strikes more Hamas targets in Gaza, the father of former hostage Idan Alexander said in his last month of captivity, Israeli airstrikes nearly killed him after a tunnel he was in was targeted. Reported first on Ynet, the quick action by one of the Hamas terrorists to activate a blast door to prevent entry of toxic gases says saved his life and the terrorists around him. During one of the explosions, the ceilings collapsed and Alexander was buried underneath, according to the report. He dug himself out and is still receiving treatment for an injury to his shoulder after he's been released. Meanwhile, Lidar, a new report indicates that Hamas is facing a major crisis in the Gaza Strip when it comes to popular support that is dwindling. Funds continue to decrease in addition to their military strength as this ground offensive continues inside of the Gaza Strip. It also indicates that they're having a difficult time paying operatives and government officials in the Gaza Strip as well.
Thank you, Shosh, for the report. And moving on. As we celebrate Jerusalem Day, a time to honor the enduring spirit and unity of Israel's capital, we turn our attention to the remarkable progress and development being made in the city. Joining us in the studio is A.B. Dayan, owner and CEO of Platinum Realtors, the firm marketing the prestigious Migdalei Kramim project in Kiryat Moshe in Jerusalem. This new residential development by the veteran Mishab Real Estate Development Group, which has developed projects not only in Jerusalem but throughout Israel, embodies the city's incredible growth and resilience. A.B., thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
So, as we commemorate Jerusalem Day, we're seeing so much development in Israel's, eternal capital. Can you provide an overview of why that is? What is drawing people from Israel and from around the world to Jerusalem now?
First of all, when it comes to Jerusalem, people have been drawn to Jerusalem for years. Okay, Jerusalem is the capital of Israel. Jerusalem is in everyone's heart and everyone's soul. We're feeling it throughout the world. People think of Jerusalem, it's a part of them. When they say the word Jerusalem, for them, they feel like it's a part of them. And they're not only looking at it as if it's like dollars and cents, if it makes sense, but rather they want to be a part of Yerushalayim, be a part of the growth in Jerusalem. It's like it's something that just you feel connected, which is great.
Absolutely. And can you tell us a little bit more specifically about this, Migdalei Kramim project? What makes it such a unique project for Jerusalem?
So when speaking about Migdalei Kramim, there are many developments. Now, regarding Migdalei Kramim, we're talking about a development that's in a neighborhood that's drawn to many, many people, okay? It's in the Kiryat Moshe neighborhood. It's off of the train line. It's right next to the entrance and the exit of the city through the new 16th Street. It's a developed neighborhood. We're not coming into a new neighborhood where they're going to be putting up synagogues, they're going to be putting up schools. Everything's already developed. People have been waiting for this for years. And the fact that it's an urban renewal development, you're talking about a neighborhood that's actually developed, and it's just it's a great development.
And I want to go back because you talked a little bit about sort of the connection to Jerusalem, that people feel it, from the heart. And today in the world, we're seeing anti-Semitism rising really around the world. So how is this project also appealing not just to Jews here in Israel, but to those considering Aliyah, seeking, sort of a secure and enriching environment in Israel?
So, like I said, the fact that the infrastructure is already there, okay, where you have Americans there, you have South Americans, you have French as well, you have Israeli, you're coming to a neighborhood that actually has a little bit of everyone and everything, so it gives it a much better feeling of sense of there's a community already waiting for you. And again, you're close to a vibrant community in Givat Shul, in Har Nof, in Kiryat Moshe, in Bet HaKarem. Everything is literally you're in the center of Jerusalem, which answers to every crowd, every type of crowd, every kihlah that's coming, and many kids, many parks. You can't go wrong. Everything's already there. It's already set in place for you to come to this beautiful development.
Mm-hmm. And looking ahead, what are your expectations for Jerusalem's real estate market? And how does your company sort of plan to contribute to the city's growth and development?
So we've been in the Jerusalem market for over 15 years, and we've constantly seeing it growing and growing, and more demand. Corona came along, we had crazy demand. A war came along, you would expect a war, throughout Israel. You've been hearing numbers up and down in certain areas, but Jerusalem, I just came back from a conference recently, and they just said whoever is building in Jerusalem, their numbers are through the roof. Why is that? Like we said, Jerusalem has a personal connection to every single person, and people doesn't have to make sense, it doesn't have to make sense when it comes to dollars and cents, which it does, but then people feel connected and they want a piece of Yerushalayim, and then we're there to hold the client's hand. We're there from the second the guy says, or the client says that we're interested. At the end, the second they say that, we put them in touch with the financing, we put them in touch with the right people. And it's the heart wants it. And that's what we've been feeling throughout 15 years that we've been around. We've been feeling that the heart wants Yerushalayim, and that's what's been pushing people to come to Jerusalem.
The heart wants Jerusalem. Abi, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot.
And now let's take a look at the weather forecast. Sunny skies are expected around most of the country tonight, with temperatures reaching lows of 21 degrees Celsius or 71 degrees Fahrenheit. Then tomorrow we'll see clear skies alongside hot temperatures with highs of 35 degrees Celsius or 95 degrees Fahrenheit. And that's a wrap for today's news. For the latest updates from Israel on all your devices, be sure to follow our ILTV channel, subscribe to our newsletter, and explore our website, iltv.tv. Stay informed with the latest news straight from the heart of Israel. I'm Lidarga Velazi. Be well, stay safe, and thank you so much for watching.